Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my March mid-month wrap up. The first couple weeks of March I read 9 books. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about how I felt about those books. Okay, so first, it is so windy outside and raining and just it sounds like my house is going to blow over. So if you hear anything like that, I apologize. Also, my animals are going nuts today. My cats, my rabbit, my dogs, they're all just in here wreaking havoc. So if you hear noise, sorry. But the first book that I want to talk about, the first book that I read in March was The Body Keeps the Score from Bessel van der Kolk. I gave this 4 stars. This is a nonfiction about how the body and mind respond to trauma of any kind. So this book is really hard for me to formulate my thoughts on because it's extremely triggering for anyone who has suffered any kind of abuse or trauma of any kind, really. I feel like this is a book that I'm not sure if anyone who has had those kind of situations in their life, if you're ever gonna truly be in the right mindset to read this book, because I'm someone who has gone through that for many years of my life as a child. And my time reading this book, I was super nauseous. I was panicky, on edge, and it kind of put me into like a horrible mindset for the coming weeks. I still am trying to bring myself out of that kind of depressive state that reliving trauma can do for someone. So I just want anyone who considers reading this book to be super aware of that and cautious, and make your decision based upon how you think you can handle something like this, because it does talk a lot about sexual abuse, about childhood trauma, abusive parents, things like that. It's pretty heavy on that. And then it also later on in the book goes into how your body responds to physical trauma. So like car accidents, things like that. But it does focus a lot around mental trauma and how your body reacts to that and the things that can happen to you after such events. So just be kind of cautious reading it. I gave it 4 stars because I do think that it could be helpful. I also think it could give someone the push that they need to seek help that they need to get. And I feel like it was very informative. It really did do what it set out to do, I think. It just was extremely hard to read. So keep that in mind. Be cautious if you choose to read it. The next book I read was Dyer, a Young Girl by Anne Frank. I did not read this in high school, middle school, anytime. To be honest, I'm not sure when you're supposed to read this in school. I did not read this in school, so I felt like it was something that was important for me to read. However, after reading it, I am so upset at the fact that I never got the chance to experience this in high school. And I feel like anybody who did read it in high school should reread it, because it just hit so hard, and it's not anything that you can explain or describe in any way, really, in my opinion. It's like super hard to tell you any more than what it says it is. It's a diary of a girl who was hiding for her safety, but really didn't understand the magnitude of what was happening until the end. And it was kind of nice to see this girl who wasn't super bogged down with everything that was going on in the world at that time, and to see her still be able to kind of be a child, even though she was in this annex hiding and couldn't go out and do anything, but to also see how smart she was, how funny she was. She had such a little attitude, and it was so sad at the end for me when her diary entries just stop and you know what happens to her. It obviously felt like you didn't get a conclusion, because you don't, because she doesn't, because she ends up in this horrible place. I just feel like this is something that everybody should read and keep in mind what's going on in the world and what happens to her after this ends, because that puts it so much more into context, and I feel like it hit me much harder because I kept those things in mind. And I loved her so much while reading this, and I wanted so much for her, even though I knew what was going to happen to her. So I just feel like this is something that's super important to read or to reread as an adult, because I feel like you'll get so much more out of it. The next book I read was The Pisces from Melissa Broader. I gave this one 4 stars as well. This book is my kind of weird. Like, it is weird. It's a fantasy romance about this girl who falls in love with a merman. Like, it's bizarre. And it goes places that you absolutely do not expect. It gets pretty dark at times. I was not expecting that, but I still liked it. Like, it's not your typical romance, and it doesn't end the way you think it's gonna end, but I enjoyed my time reading it. I know it's not gonna be for everyone, but I think if you like romance and you want something different, maybe give it a shot. The next book I read was Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. I gave this one 3 stars. This is a YA fantasy. People say it's romance, but I don't really. You can see where the romance may have happened or where it may go in the next book, but this book isn't really a romance. I really enjoyed my time reading it. It was a 4-star until the last 2 chapters. The last 2 chapters just really, really disappointed me. So I dropped it down to 3 stars. I'm still gonna read the next one to see if it can come back for me, but I was really disappointed in the ending. It's about this girl whose twin sister dies, and she's trying to find out who killed her, and ends up summoning a prince of hell, and then they work together to try and solve this murder and subsequent murders that happen. So, good premise. I liked it, like I said, until the last 2 chapters, which really, really disappointed me. So I'm still kind of excited to see where the next one goes. So I will be reading that, but this one was 3 stars. The next book I read was Kingdom of Shadow and Light by Karen Marie Moning. This is the 11th book in the Fever series. I loved the Fever series. Absolutely loved it when I read it, the first 10. I DNF'd this book for now because it has a completely different feel. It has a completely different format. We've got all these point of view chapters from different characters that we never had before. And I like stories with multiple points of view, but it was just very bizarre to me that the 11th book in this series is so drastically different, written so drastically different than the rest of the series, that it was throwing me off. And I didn't like it's not that I didn't like the characters that the different chapters were written from, but I didn't care as much because I was so invested in Mac and Barron's that I didn't care so much about the rest of them, because those are the 2 characters that the first 10 books are really about, and Danny and Ryden, but not these other people who are all of a sudden reading from. I don't know. It just didn't feel right for me right now. I read about 40% of it. I will definitely at some point go back and finish the book, because when I DNF'd it, for the next couple days I was sitting there kind of wondering, like, well, I wonder what happened. So I will go back and finish it, but I'm just afraid that it's gonna impact the way I feel about the series in a negative way. So I almost don't want to, but I know that I eventually will go and finish it, but I did DNF it for now. The next book I read was The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I gave this one 4 stars. This is a historical fiction about World War II. Follows 2 sisters who take very different paths in the war. And I was not invested in this story until the second half. The first half, if I was reading it physically, I probably would have DNF'd it. I was listening to it on audio, so I pushed through. I'm glad I pushed through, obviously, because I gave it 4 stars and I ended up crying. It broke my heart. So I'm glad that I pushed through and I finished it, but I really wasn't invested until the second half. But that being said, it has made me want to read more Kristen Hanna, because I've never read anything by Kristen Hanna and I'm now kind of interested. I really want to read The Four Winds. So it ended up being all right. Next, I read The Curse of 10th Grave by Dorinda Jones. I gave this one 3 stars. This is a paranormal romance. This is the 10th book in the Charlie Davidson series. I've kind of talked about the series multiple times because I'm just listening to them on audio, kind of reading like 2, 3, 4 every month. So I've talked about it a few times, but this book was more about solving the case that they were working on than anything else. Really, I mean, towards the end, we kind of got back into that paranormal aspect of it, but it was mostly about solving this case, which is kind of how the beginning books were more focused around, but this book almost to me felt like a filler. So that's why I only gave it 3 stars, but I'm obviously going to continue with the series. There's only 3 left. Next, I read Honey Girl by Morgan Roger. This is a contemporary romance, and I gave it 2.5 stars. Another one that I would have DNF'd if I wasn't listening to it on audio. I just could not make myself care. I did not care about the characters. I didn't care about the story. I didn't care about the plot. I just didn't care. And I was bored, and I felt like the 2 love interests had no chemistry and should not be together. I don't know. I just really did not like this. This is about a girl who gets married in Vegas to a girl she just met and how their relationship plays out. So I was disappointed. I saw some people give it some really good rating. So I was excited about reading it, but I just didn't care. And the last book that I'm going to talk about today is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I gave this one 3 stars. This is a sci-fi horror. I really enjoyed the first third of this book, and this book is less than 200 pages. It's not very long. I really liked the first third, and then the last 2 thirds put me into a reading slump, and it took me like almost a week to read this book. Less than 200 pages, it took me almost a week to read it. I don't know why I pushed myself to finish it. I really don't. But I felt like it kind of wrapped itself up enough at the end for me to be done. I'm not going to continue on with the series. I was satisfied as much as I could be satisfied with the way it ended, and I'm just moving on. Do you get the answers that you want or that you're looking for at the end of this book? Absolutely not. Do you get any answers at all? Really? No. But I'm okay with that because I'm not going to put myself through another reading slump, especially because the rest of the books are like twice as big as this one was, and I could barely finish this one. So I'm not saying Jeff Vandermeer is not for me, because it wasn't the fact that it was weird. It wasn't that there was like bizarre things going on. It wasn't that you didn't understand what was going on half the time. It was none of that. That wasn't the reason why it kind of put me into a reading slump. So I'm gonna read some other books by him, just not the rest of this series. Those are the 9 books that I've read so far in March. This month has been pretty slumpy for me. I haven't read anything that really like stuck out and made me excited to read, unfortunately. So I'm hoping the second half of the month will be better, but we will see. So that is everything for me this time. I will see you all next time. Bye.